Welcome to PowerUp podcast, the podcast that seeks to empower and dismantle, giving us the power and confidence to question, deconstruct, rebuild, and expand in life. I'm your host, Amma Rouge, voiceover and multidisciplinary artist, well-being advocate, food and book geek with over 14 years of movement-centered experience.
I am your host, Mesma, artist, choreographer, yogi and coach with a passion for alchemy, creativity, transformation and workplace wellness.
We recognise that we can't dismantle and empower or be empowered without first learning ourselves, diving deeper to unlearn the harmful, restrictive and unprogressive. It's an ongoing practice and journey for us all, which is why we created this podcast.
Our show features guests doing the work to enlighten, deconstruct and power up in their own magical ways.
We're going to be having conversations around the power of healing, transformation, well-being and creativity, and how they feed our personal and collective evolution, how they help us power up. From the boardroom to an ayahuasca retreat centre and back to the boardroom via El Camino de Santiago, there isn't much that Jennifer Tarjanyi doesn't know about going inside, seeking, finding and trusting the journey. After 15 years in leadership and organisational development, I realised that I was selling snake oil, she says. The world doesn't need more learning. We need something radical. I call it unlearning. Jennifer is an expert in company culture and leadership development. She's spent 15 years working with some of the world's most prestigious companies. However, having been on her own 10-year journey of self-discovery, she now believes that the only way to achieve true transformation, whether at work or in other areas of your life, is to dig deep, you know we love digging deep, into all of your subconscious programming. And so we're absolutely gassed to be sitting down to chat with her today. Welcome, Jen.
Thank you. It's so nice to be with you. I've been so excited to have this conversation with you both since we first started talking about it. I can't believe it's actually happening.
So I guess the first thing that we want to ask you is, what do you do?
Oh, I love this question. Actually, I hate this question because it's kind of, I think I've got to the point now where I describe it like this. So there is this beautiful quote by Rumi, who was a 13th century poet, and he said, "Your task is not to seek for love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers you've built within yourself against it." And if you took the word love out of that quote and replaced it with any of the things that people might be trying to achieve, either in leadership or in terms of their own self-development, then you've basically got the essence of my approach to everything. So your task is not to seek to be a better communicator. Your task is not to seek for equity or equality. Your task is not to seek to be more open, whatever it is. But you need to seek and find the barriers you built within yourself against it. And I think this is where what I do differs from people who work in learning and development or leadership development more traditionally, who go with training, which is very much like, here's some information, so what, basically. And what I do is like, okay, so you want to be this, what's stopping you? What's the subconscious programming? What is stopping you being a more values-driven organisation? What is stopping us from being a more inclusive world? What is stopping you from being a better partner? It doesn't really matter what it is you're trying to achieve, but that, I think, is the essence of what I do, whether it's with companies or individuals.
And that for me is alchemy. Yeah, that right there is the turning the lead, turning our stuff into gold, which is what we are all about here on PowerUp podcast. How would you go about that, Jen, in a workspace? Because I'm kind of imagining that maybe not all workspaces are open to this, and does it take like a quite a long process to get people ready for doing that work? What is your approach?
Yeah, God, Jen, let's start with the readiness question, because there are some places that are never going to want to do this. There are some places that are quite happy to treat leadership development and learning and development as a tick box exercise, do the same workshops they've always done. I have a particular hatred for this thing called soft skills, which seems to be, let's take active listening. That's a workshop that people peddle all the time. And it seems to be how to perform pretending to listen. So saying things like, and that must be really hard for you. And you'll get trainers who say things like show empathy. So not be empathetic and feel empathy, but show empathy. And it's like, okay, so what actually then happens when they're in a situation where they have to listen? At best, they're going to perform this kind of weird pantomime that you've taught them, but the reality is nothing's actually going to change. So the question would then be like, what are the barriers that you've built to listening? Is it that you have certain biases against who you listen to? Is it that you are so busy thinking about whether or not you deserve a place at the table and how you're going to prove that you deserve to be at that table, that you're just waiting to speak and say something else that's insightful? Like, what is the real story that's going on inside you? And it's probably really murky and horrible and hard to look at, and that's okay. But that's the difference between kind of training and transformation. And that's the difference between what I do and what I used to do. And I'm, hands up, I'm in recovery. I used to train active listening skills. I used to train difficult conversations. I've done all that stuff. But that's why I can say with honesty that I know it doesn't work, that it does something, but it doesn't do enough for my taste. It doesn't do transformation. So to go back to your question, there are people that still want to do that stuff, and that's okay. Like, total respect for everybody and their choices. But also there are other organisations that are like, we've done this stuff for years and nothing has actually changed. And so then those organisations will be the ones that want to come and do something radical and work with me. What I find fascinating is that when I first started doing this and kind of made the transition, I thought people would be resistant. I thought I'd have to dumb down my language or, kind of sell people the idea. But actually what I've noticed is people are hungry for it. And sometimes I get allocated a leader to work with on a one-on-one basis. And I've in the beginning especially, I felt like I had to, my internal voice was saying I had to prove my place at the table and I had to prove my value. And what I found was people came to me with this kind of relief of like, oh, thank God I don't have to do that anymore. Thank God I can admit the truth, which is that, I'm frightened. I've got imposter syndrome. I'm waiting for somebody to tell me off. I think most adults are just waiting to be told off, and we have never got the memo that we're not at school anymore. And we all like it. I have never met a single person that hasn't got this somewhere in the background, and that then doesn't drive their behaviour. So, whether it's being values driven or whether it's being inclusive or whether it's being present or whatever it is, underneath it, like, there is this just, oh my God, please take this away from me. I'm just so sick of pretending. And so I find that it's usually a brave decision for the decision maker to say, yeah, we're up for this. But once it gets down to now I'm working with the individuals in the company, everyone's like, great, let's do this. I'm so ready. Please let me tell you all my worries. And that's what's been the biggest surprise and the most beautiful surprise about this work, is that there is a readiness in most people.
So gorgeous.
I think 2020 has done a lot for it, if I'm honest, and 2021, COVID, let's say, is that I think two things happened. One was there was a pause in the behavioural muscle memory. We weren't doing what we'd always done, like, get in the car, park in the same space. I had a friend tell me recently that she used to walk the same route to her desk every day. There was two ways she could go. There was no preference between the two. It wasn't to go past the coffee machine or avoid a certain person, but she just did the same thing every day. And we do that behaviourally as well.
So fascinating. Yeah.
And I think also, like, some of the barriers got broken down as well, didn't they? People suddenly, we know what people's homes look like. We know what people's children look like. We know what it is to be in collective. I think there's always been collective uncertainty, but people were at least willing to see it. And now people are like, oh yeah, I don't really want to go back to that old life. So maybe I can think about doing something different. And that's quite cool.
It's making me think about the word authenticity and this, like, that as we are in our homes, we have to be more authentic, but it's like these layers, these masks are coming off, and we're actually finding, I prefer this version that, for example, might not wear makeup every day, or might be able to just admit, I'm struggling with this is difficult, can you help me? So I think there is this and that as we are more authentic with one another, as we see more layers to one another, there's just so much more compassion possible in the workspace.
Yeah. I mean, authentic, that's a fascinating word to put into this like conversation as well, because I think to us it means one thing, and then there is this whole great big am I allowed to say wanky? I just have. But there's
We
this
allow you.
yeah, thank you. That's what I just needed to say. It's a word I use a lot, but there's this kind of wanky leadership culture of authentic leadership, which, you know, again means very little until you apply the Rumi quote. So it's like, your task is not to seek to be authentic, but to seek and find all the barriers you've built against it. And when you, you know, because otherwise people say, otherwise it becomes this performative thing again. How do you perform being an authentic leader? How can you teach someone to be an authentic leader?
Yeah.
I see other leadership companies saying, oh, you know, I've got an authentic leadership program, or we teach authentic leadership. And that just seems to be, no, we just teach what we've always taught, which is a set of slightly robotic leadership models. And we call it authentic leadership because we watched some Brené Brown and we think that's a good idea now. So if we flip the conversation into like, okay, what is stopping you being authentic? You know, it might be, you know, the stories that you were told as a child around showing your emotions in your family, or the time that you got bullied in the playground because you were more sensitive than other people, or the way that you hemmed yourself into this tiny little box in order to pass your degree or get your first job, and how that then just never stops. Now, that is a much more pragmatic way of getting to authentic leadership.
Let's just dig down, peel off all the layers. Let's get to the actual root of it, so the change can happen internally, and what comes out externally is then much more authentic. You know, it's a real feeling. It's feeling that's behind it, and there's feeling that is behind all of the action, rather than just, like you're saying, robotic actions taken over the top of all of this.
Yeah, which is exactly what we've always done. And, you know, and I'm always very conscious not to be like just criticizing everybody in my industry, but I also think that there does need to be like a bit of a, you know, I've been calling it an invitation and a rallying cry to just say, let's go a bit deeper. We have this amazing opportunity now where people are willing to be more authentic, and there's been all kinds of world events that have given us some nasty shocks. Let's have better conversations now. Let's choose to make better choices, because the leaders in the corporate world are the leaders of, you know, the decisions that are made in the corporate environment are decisions that affect the world. And if those decisions come from a fear-based place of lack and competition and uncertainty, you know, and fear of not being good enough, then the decisions are ones that are greedy and damage other people and perpetuate systemic abuse of all different kinds. Whereas if a decision comes from a place of, I'm a full person who knows who I am and knows what my fears are and what my triggers are, and I'm going to act instead from a place of being aligned to my own values and my true human self, those decisions become, you know, much more beautiful and much more beneficial to everybody, and ultimately are going to change the trajectory of humanity and the planet and all this good stuff.
I watched Seaspiracy this week, which was an experience, and it was definitely an experience. But there's one quote. I'm going to just say a little TW here of maybe you don't want to hear this quote from Seaspiracy, so maybe you want to bring down your volume. But basically, that there might not be any fish in the sea in the year 2048, and it really makes me think in terms of this work and how leaders can create change. That when we are, you know, back into that space of our cup is full up and we don't need to fix ourselves and we don't need to kind of work from this place of fear, that actually we'll be making decisions that can help generations in the future as well.
I love it. Can I just jump on this, Ella? Because I often use Netflix actually as different ways to illustrate my points. I do one about the whole SeaWorld expose, the blackfish thing, because it's kind of the same thing. It's that somebody somewhere made decisions about overfishing or fishing in ways that were damaging to other marine life. I'm guessing what this documentary was about. At the moment, I'm too scared to watch it. I already don't eat fish, but I also know that I will be deeply upset by it. And I'm like, do I want to be upset? Which is also a thing to look at in itself. But, you know, somebody somewhere, or several people, many people made decisions that did things that were damaging. And they would have done it from a place of greed or lack, or, you know, wanting the biggest bonus, wanting to be the most, have the biggest a reputation, wanting, or just, oh, everybody else is doing it and I can't stand up and say, I don't think this is right because I want to belong and I want to be liked. These are all perfect examples of things that on a grand scale, God, we might not have any fish in like 20 something years. But on a minor scale, it's happening in every single person's company, in every organization. There are people making decisions because of their bonus, because of their reputation, because they want to be liked, because they don't want to rock the boat, because they want to belong, because if they, have the best balance sheet and manage their budget in the best possible way, doesn't matter what else is affected, as long as they have served their sense of safety and status. And so, like, we have this, the thin end of the wedge is, somebody sold something that was a little bit fishy, for what, pardon the pun, somewhere in your company. I know, I'm sorry. And then on a grand scale, we got no fish.
Yeah.
And it's the same problems that cause both these things and it was the same at SeaWorld. There were people who made decisions that caused whales to be damaged. They were kept in conditions that weren't good for them, caused a psychosis, and the whales started killing people, and then it was all covered up. PR cover-ups are another great example. Let's just keep the reputation of the business fine. Doesn't matter what's actually going on. And if people looked at the fear-based programming that's causing that and made peace with it and decided to love themselves instead, then they wouldn't make these decisions. And that's the whole premise of this one woman Gobby mission that I'm on, to kind of change things.
Amazing. What an amazing one woman Gobby mission you're on.
Yeah, and I think that should be the name of this episode as well. The One Woman Gobby Mission. I think that's the episode name.
I love it.
But you're absolutely primed as well, Jen. You're primed, to be in a position to do this work because, like you said, you have been on the other side of it, so to speak. So, who better than to go, do you know what? Actually, I've been there. I've done all of that. And now I actually recognize that it's not the way, and that we need to go deeper and we need to do more, and working with people and with organizations at this level, the ripple effect of it is then going to impact humanity, people, systems in a much more positive and sustainable way than, the ways that we're already living in life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it was hard to make peace with it. This is something I really want to say. If there are people in my industry listening to this and saying like, well, at the moment I'm very unpopular on LinkedIn with the learning development community because they feel like I'm slating everything that they're doing. But I get their point, like, because I had to go through it myself. It was like, it was a weird journey for me. And you've mentioned something of my own sort of internal work. I went off and did the Camino. When I drank some ayahuasca, had a really extreme experience with it, ended up hanging out in the ayahuasca camp for 6 months and kind of working with it all and, really, really went deep into my own shadow. But I was kind of for 10 years doing all the inner work at home and in my, my own self, and then going to work and still delivering the PowerPoint slides with the ugly model. And, and there was this big kind of aha moment where I was like, oh no, I'm like a quack. I've got great pencil dress and heels, but I'm a quack and I'm selling transformation, and what I'm actually giving them is training. And I was like, well, what is transformation actually then? And that's when all this sort of thing came about. And I was like, it's got to be the internal journey. And it's got to be, there can be no systemic change of any kind, whether it's on a planetary level or an organizational level. But that actually doesn't exist. There is only individual change. And so to change all systems, we must change individuals. And then I had to go through my own process of making peace with the fact that my very lofty career and my great CV and all the things I thought I was good at and made up my identity weren't actually serving people in the way that I was pretending to them and to me that they were. And that's part
scary.
of it. And that's what it is. But it's also, it's the work in itself. It's moving away from all my status, all my credibility, all my sense of identity and self, and saying, actually, I can do better. I can do more. You know better. You do it your best till you know better. Like the quote. You know what I'm getting at. And now I can do better. I can do more, and it's not about me. And I need to be okay with being a work in progress and on offering more. And that's my invitation also to any L&D professionals, HR people, OD people, all the people that are pissed off with me, basically. Also, just be willing to say, yeah, you did some good stuff, but there is more that can be done, and it's fine. It's also fine if you want to continue doing training, but actually transformation is something else. And can you lean in with some curiosity and some willingness to see what else there might be and how that can impact on a much larger scale? Because that's what's not happening on LinkedIn at the moment. I'm finding that people are jumping in to, in one comment, it's quite a skill. They can defend themselves, do a plug for their own business, and try and discredit me in the space of one paragraph, which is skillful, but it's the exact point, is that we are so attached to our own sense of belonging and status that we're then not willing to try and look at ourselves and our behaviour. So bit of an invitation to everyone to just be like, yeah, actually doesn't mean that you're crap. It just means there might be something else.
Yeah.
And, why not explore it?
Also, just to add to that, it doesn't mean you're crap, and it doesn't mean you're a bad person. Because I think a lot of people carry this idea of not only, oh my gosh, does it mean everything I've been doing or everything I've been sharing and training others in is absolute crap, but does it also make me a bad person? And I think it somehow comes back to this reflection of self and whether we feel good or bad. And so I think it's important to also mention that it doesn't make you a bad person. It just means that you're becoming more conscious, you're becoming more aware. And like you said, you do your best until you know better.
Exactly. And it extends into all versions of leadership, doesn't it? It's like whatever you did that got you to this place has made you very successful, and there will be some good in it. There will also be some other areas that you could illuminate a little bit more. And actually most of my work isn't completely transforming like a complete clean slate with people. It's saying, what little tweaks can we make? And what are the things stopping you from making the tweak?
Yes.
And that's it. Sorry, Ella, I think I interrupted you.
No, I was going to say the same thing, actually, just that, that often on the journey to get where we want to be, we will do some stuff that maybe now looking back we're embarrassed of, but we wouldn't have got here had we not made those mistakes, or maybe they weren't mistakes, maybe they were a lot of lemonade. So I'm really grateful now for some of those things that I look back and I'm like, wow, I can't believe I did that, because it has been a turning point. And some of the biggest learnings for me have been when I've messed up and gone, okay, I messed up and now I want to change and I want to do better.
Definitely. I think it's nice when it's, very conscious in your case, but for some people, the behaviour and the beliefs are still really subconscious. They don't even know they're doing it. I know people that just literally will go into a meeting and lie and not realise they're lying. And it will be little things like that, saying they were part of a conversation that they weren't, saying they've read a book that they haven't. But it's all this thing about status again, isn't it? I need to be seen. I need to be recognised. But then in this case, like if you were to say to some of these people, you lie every day, they'd be like, no, I don't. And then it's so subconscious, but it's being willing to look at it and look at the attachments that we have to comfort and status mostly, which I think are pretty much the enemy of our humanity. Like comfort and status stop us from digging deep and stop us from making change. If we can be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable and feel unsafe, even though we are not actively unsafe, then we can then start doing the work.
Yes, leaning into the discomfort and being able to occupy that space. Yes, 100%.
I think thinking about that, there's like a place where it becomes exciting, because it is about transformation, and it's about recognizing that you can be a better person, not just for you but for the world. That we create those ripples when we do lean into the discomfort. Actually, we transform, and we transform other lives. Like you said, that leaders can make such important decisions for the world, and so when this happens, the world becomes a better place. And that's a song by Michael Jackson for you.
Amazing. Insert Michael track here. Yeah, talking about leaders and people's attachment to their identities, to status, and the desire to stay in comfort leads me on to thinking about your book that you're writing, which is coming out next year. Just wanted to talk a little bit about why you decided to write this book and you know, what it means to you and what you hope it will do in the world?
So I'm planning to take some significant time off later this year from the day job and actually just sit down and write it all. Because the thing is, I talk about this stuff all day, every day. I write learning aids on this stuff. I write posts on this stuff. You know, everything is there. But I think I'm very conscious I can only touch so many people. It will depend on organisations buying these fairly substantial projects, although there's also some plans to do something a little bit more kind of off the shelf and individual and open enrollment. Not really sure what it's going to look like yet. But yeah, I want to write this book that makes it accessible. You could go as an individual leader, you could go and buy it and do the work in the same way as you'd buy like a self-help book or something like that. That it would be a combination of all my thoughts and feelings on this, but in a practical guide as well. So it's like, if this is something you want to do, if you recognise that you're a good person, but there is more that you can find in you and you want to do this, then you can literally just pick up the book and have this practical guide of how you explore yourself and your motivations and your attachments and choose something else. So it was really a way of making it affordable and accessible for as many people as possible.
Wicked.
Amazing. I can't wait.
Yeah, same.
We've got two people ready to buy your book here. And Jen, if you ever want to come on a Friday morning to the writing circle, you're so welcome.
You know that I would if it wasn't the middle of the night, Ella, because I don't get up at that time. That is not an hour that I'm awake.
I love it.
I mean, it's actually part of my own stuff as well. Like, I'm not a morning person, but I internalise so many stories that if you were not a morning person, then you were lazy or unreliable or whatever. And you know, that's a very mild thing, and that's actually part of the kind of the golden shadow, is actually just making peace with yourself. I mean, we have obviously these darker sides around greed and stuff, but you know, for me, it's been like actually just accepting that if you want me to be my best version of me, then you just have me a little bit later in the day. But I need to stop beating myself up about it and be okay with it.
That's reminds me so much of I can't remember which section, but I don't know if either of you have read the book Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. I think that's the name of the author. It's brilliant. I really highly recommend it. And there's a section where he talks about that, about morning larks and midnight owls and the different ways, the rhythms of our bodies, and you know that once you recognize how you work best and when you show up as your best self, you know, then you can tailor your day to that. And actually there's nothing wrong with whether you're a morning lark or a night owl. It's just about feeling into that and then stepping into it to work at your best.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And enjoying that for you as well, not for others, but actually this is what my body likes, and that's not even okay, that's the best.
Exactly. It's all part of it. We have all these programs, don't we? You're not allowed to do this, you must do that, you have to do it this way. And you can actually just choose to say, I don't subscribe to that programming anymore, and that's how it's going to be. I don't need to make greedy decisions, I don't need to make fear-based decisions. I can make decisions that serve me and serve other people, and that will change the world.
Beautiful. And that feels like that is powering up. Thank you for listening. You can connect to us and our guests via the links in each episode's show notes. Before you go, we invite you to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of the goodness to come. And if you enjoyed today, perhaps tell a friend to tell a friend. We are always grateful for you, our listeners, for our fabulous guests, and to everyone who has contributed to and been a part of our journey here.
Our music is by Tomo Carter. Everything else is brought to you by us, the PowerUp Power Team.
I'm Ella Mesma.
I am Amma Rouge.
And we are PowerUp Podcast.